At the exact moment the sun crested over the ridge, and lit my property in a blaze of gold, I heard the unmistakable screech of tires followed by a thunderous crunch that shook the barn's old timbers and sent a rain of dust and pigeon feathers from the rafters, and when I whipped around I saw Karen's sleek silver Tesla halfway embedded in my barn door, wood splintering like matchsticks, my prize bull bellowing in alarm inside, and 3 neighbors standing in their driveways with phones out filming. The whole disaster as if they had been waiting for it all week, and my heart skipped a beat between fury and disbelief, because this was no random accident, this was the culmination of months of her harassment. I dropped my coffee on the porch, boots pounding across the gravel as I rushed toward the scene, shouting to Karen to shut off the engine, but she just sat there in oversized sunglasses gripping the steering wheel like she was holding court and screaming that I had put my barn too close to the road, which was a ridiculous claim since the road curved onto my land and she had trespassed at full speed. My hands trembled with a mix of anger and grim amusement as I surveyed the damage, because for weeks she had been fining me through the HOA for everything from leaving my loader parked by the barn to letting my rooster crow before sunrise, and now her own arrogance had literally crashed into my livelihood, a metaphor so perfect it would have been funny if it wasn't my barn door. I knelt and yanked at the door hinge to free the bull before he panicked further, muttering under my breath about how Karen had called inspectors, mailed threats, even tried to bribe my nephew to spy on me, and still she never imagined the quiet old guy in the plaid shirt was taking notes, saving every letter and email, building a folder of her crimes like a prosecutor preparing for court. She jumped out of the car finally, nearly tripping on her designer heels in the gravel, waving a manicured hand at me, shouting that I was liable for her damage, that her attorney would eat me alive, and that I had 10 minutes to apologize before she called the sheriff. The neighbors gasped at her tone, but I stayed calm, even smiling slightly because the diesel rumble of my loader parked 20 feet away was a sound she had always mocked, and yet it was about to become the sound of her undoing. She demanded I let her inspect the barn for illegal modifications, pointing a finger at my security cameras as if they were an affront to her status, and I thought of every fine, every sleepless night she had caused me, every bit of petty humiliation she had tried to inflict, and felt something steel-hard click into place inside me. I reached into my vest and pulled out the envelope of documents, the land survey proving the HOA had no jurisdiction past the creek, the cease and desist letter my attorney had drafted, the drone footage of her trespassing, and I saw her eyes flicker with the first sign of fear. I said nothing yet, only let the paper rustle in my hand as she grew louder, her voice trembling at the edges, and for the first time in months I felt the upper hand shift toward me. Behind me the loader stood tall, bucket raised, coated in dust and hay, and I imagined its hydraulic arms lowering with a hiss like a predator stretching its claws, and I knew I wasn't just defending a barn door anymore, I was defending my entire right to be left alone. The neighbors murmured, phones still rolling, and one of them whispered, "This is going to go viral," like it was a Netflix show and not real life. Karen tried to shove past me toward the barn, but I planted my boots firmly in the gravel and told her to wait for the sheriff, voice low and steady like the tide before a storm, and her bravado faltered as she glanced back at her Tesla's crumpled hood, realizing too late that she had crossed a line. My bull calmed slightly as I stroked his muzzle through the gap, whispering reassurance, while Karen's hands fluttered with desperation as she barked orders to no one. I caught my reflection in the barn window, and saw not the man she had mocked but someone coiled and patient, someone who had been underestimated too many times. As the siren of the approaching deputy rose in the distance and Karen's tirade cracked into shrill panic, I felt the plan crystallize in my head, a plan that would turn this wreck into my liberation, and with the loader looming over us like a mechanical beast I allowed myself the smallest, darkest grin, knowing that by sundown the balance of power on this land would never be the same again. The deputy's cruiser rolled up with its lights flashing but no siren, gravel crunching under its tires as the neighbors widened their semicircle, phones held high like they were capturing a prize fight instead of a property dispute, and Karen launched into her performance before the car had even stopped, waving her arms and shouting that I had deliberately trapped her, that my barn door had jumped out at her Tesla, and that I was some kind of rural menace bent on hurting her, while the deputy stepped out slowly, adjusting his hat, looking from her to the crumpled vehicle to me leaning on the loader with a calm expression like I'd been expecting this all morning. The deputy asked for documents and I handed over the thick envelope with a steady hand, watching Karen's confidence falter as she realized I'd been keeping records, and when he flipped through the papers his eyebrows rose at the detailed maps, the HOA bylaws, and the footage from my cameras showing her weaving off the road and into my barn. Karen sputtered about her rights, but the deputy silenced her with a palm raised, telling her to wait while he assessed the damage. My bull snorted inside, now calm again, and the loader's engine ticked in the sun, its bucket raised slightly like a stage curtain waiting to drop. Karen's allies on the HOA board had begun arriving, drawn by the noise and the text messages she had sent calling for backup, but instead of a supportive crowd she found a ring of curious witnesses, some even smirking as they saw the evidence piling up against her. I kept my words few and low, explaining to the deputy how she had trespassed repeatedly, how she had filed false complaints about livestock odors, and how she had tried to fine me for using my own land. Karen tried to shout me down, but each outburst only made her look more unstable, and the deputy began to take notes with an expression that told me he'd seen this play before. With the paperwork in official hands and the crowd thickening, I decided it was time to act on the plan that had formed the moment I saw her car stuck in my barn. I walked to the loader and fired it up, diesel growl filling the air, the bucket lifting high as Karen spun around and yelled for me to stop, claiming I was endangering evidence, but I pointed out calmly that her car was blocking access to my livestock and creating a safety hazard, and that I had the legal right to clear my property. The deputy gave a small nod, stepping back with arms folded, making no move to stop me, and Karen's face drained of color as the crowd erupted in murmurs and camera shutters. Slowly, deliberately, I drove the loader toward the Tesla, positioning the bucket above the crumpled hood, pausing just long enough for every phone to capture the moment, then lowered it until the steel edge touched metal with a screech, and in one smooth motion I flattened the hood like a soda can under a boot, hydraulic arms pressing down with a hiss as Karen's scream cut through the morning air. The crowd gasped, then some laughed, the deputy simply jotting another note as if this were all inevitable. Karen staggered backward, clutching her phone, trying to call someone who might rescue her, but no one stepped forward. I raised the bucket, showing the pancaked hood, then nudged the Tesla clear of the barn entrance and set the loader in park, climbing down as calmly as if I'd just moved a bale of hay. The deputy informed Karen that the damage was on her and that trespassing charges might be filed, and her allies began whispering, realizing she had dragged them into a losing war. One even slipped me a nod of quiet respect as Karen collapsed against the fence, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her aura of power collapsing like her car. The bull poked his head out and snorted as if in applause. I turned to the crowd and said nothing, only patted the loader's fender like a faithful dog and walked back toward my porch, the morning sun warm on my shoulders, feeling for the first time in months that the land was truly mine again. In that silence, broken only by the clicking of phone cameras and the distant hum of the deputy's radio, Karen's empire of petty rules crumbled, and I knew the video would travel far beyond our little road, not as proof of her victimhood but as the moment she met the boundary she could not push past.